Natlan is the most mysterious region so far in Genshin Impact. We have barely no information about it, and with update 5.0 approaching, I wanted to share what we know and some realistic speculations. Also, while I'm here talking, I'll try to imagine and design what the Pyro Archon could look like based off the cultural references used to build Natlan, so I hope you enjoy. First of all, let's break down everything that we know so far that was officially confirmed by Hoyoverse. So, Natlan has changed quite a bit over the past 1,000 years, so I've put a kind of like a timeline comparison of what was true in the past and what is true in the present time. So the first point that I wanted to bring up is that Murata was the Archon 1,000 years ago, but probably not anymore. As we've seen in the manga with Vanessa and Venti, which was over 500 years ago, the children of Murata don't even recognize her name anymore. So at that point, she already died or disappeared. Many assume she's dead because Genyu tells the Traveler that besides Morax and Venti, all the original Archons have already died. And in the story of the Lava Walker, we learned that in the past, the Margivari was known as a sea of flames. There you could hear the sounds of a distant crying. But from Bennett's and Stanley backstory, we learned that over the past 2 decades, the Margivari is a sea of ashes where everything is silent. If you don't know the Lava Walker story, do look into it, but as a very quick, short summary, the Lava Walker was just a guy who lived in a very distant past, and he created an artifact to withstand fire. After loads of drama, he was challenged to walk past the Sea of Flames wearing his artifact to essentially prove his point. The artifact worked, and the Lava Walker kept walking and walking until he disappeared in the horizon. Years later, people would hear a crying sound coming from the Margivari, which they couldn't distinguish if it was from the Lava Walker or the Phoenix. Now the Phoenix. It seems that the Phoenix was worshipped like some sort of deity, and although it was stated in many different places that it lives in the Sea of Flames, it has never been mentioned again. Since the Margivari is now silent, we can assume that the Phoenix is no longer there. Much like the Archon, we can only speculate at this point if they are dead, disappeared, or reborn in another form, which is what I will get into more detail when sharing my personal speculations. An extra point that I'd like to bring up about the Margivari is that when the Lava Walker walks past the Sea of Flames, he mentions in his story that he cannot keep track of time anymore. So for that, he builds a hourglass, but still can't really have a sense of time. I think this is an important point and means that the time there doesn't function normally, perhaps similar to how the Fey realm works in Celtic mythology, but nothing's really confirmed, it's just that that was his perception. Now, my favorite bit of information that we just got very recently from New Villette is that Natlan is a nation of dragons, and that they have somehow evolved to live amongst humankind. I have loads of theories on the dragons. This is definitely my favorite bit of information, so I will get into more detail about this later in this video. Now, speaking of Tanakh, in his story, he recruits allies from 6 major tribes, so we are safe to assume that we will have many varied tribes, at least 6, and I'm expecting a lot of diversity and probably conflict between those tribes. Also in his story, there is mention of a black tide, some sort of natural or human-caused disaster. We don't know any further details about it, only that it was a very long time ago. So hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. Now, for the present times, we do know now that Murata's name is unknown. And that means that like the Phoenix, she could be dead, disappeared, or reborn in another form. Also, as I've mentioned previously, in Stanley and Bennett's story, we learned that the Margivari is now a sea of ashes and completely silent. Which is recent, probably just the past decade or 2 decades. Which means that no one knows where the Phoenix currently is. They don't know if it's alive, if it lives in Margivari, nobody has seen it. We also learned that because of the flames are no more, the original Stanley goes through the Margivari. So I imagine someone would have seen the Phoenix if they can walk past the Margivari now. And from Bennett's backstory, we are safe to assume that he was found in the Margivari or in the area around it. Also, currently, Natlan has a sport called shadowboxing. We don't know how long this sport has been around, but I imagine it's been there since the past. Because we don't have confirmation of that, I thought as a present time thing, but it could have been around for longer than that. And lastly, a bit of a trivia is that we also learned from that Inazuman guy that Natlan has natural hot springs in its volcanic region, which I cannot wait to see. So this is all we know for Natlan, and for everything that I mentioned, I have listed all the references in the description box down below if you want to check further details. So now let's move on to my personal assumptions, putting all this information together, what I think it's gonna happen. It's gonna be really fun to compare when the Natlan actually comes out, if I got anything right. So I'll probably make another video when the update is out in a few months. So my first assumption is that we will probably have dragon mounts and some sort of flying mechanic. I say this because obviously dragons live in Natlan. We know that the updates prior to a new region are almost like a testing ground for the next region. And some of the quests that we've done so far have kind of like inspired me to think that we possibly will have a flying mechanic. So instead of just gliding around or jumping up and slowly falling, I think we will be able to actually fly, which makes sense with the size of the map just increasing more and more. We still have Snezhnaya to be updated, and we also may have Celestia and Caria, so we still have many regions. The map is huge. We already have some of that flying theme recently, and not only that, but the Sorush quest in the desert and the Mary Ann quest in Fontaine. In both of these, we are actually flying. So that could be some sort of testing for a flying mechanic and see how it works from whoever's point of view. They could implement a new flying mechanic, and dragon mounts would be the perfect way to do that. I would absolutely love to play as if I'm in the How to Train Your Dragon kind of universe. Unfortunately, there is a very disappointing possibility of the dragons being humanoids, so something like the Melusines. I do have quite a few suspicions that this could be true for different reasons. Of course, I still hope the dragon mounts and the flying mechanic is going to happen. That's just like my hopeful thinking, I guess. But there is a high chance of the dragons evolving to be living amongst mankind, as in they are literal humanoids now. So, for example, not only we have the Melusines, but if you look at Yansan, the only Natlan character we know so far, she is of a unique race that we haven't seen before. She has different sort of ears. It's initially I thought it was elf ears, but it's different from Klee's, and it's also different from the yokai from Inazuma. So she is definitely some sort of new species. And if you see on Honkai Star Rail, which is obviously not the same game, but still from the same kind of like parallel universe there, we have the kind of like dragon people, which is Dunhang and Bailu as well. So there is I feel like there is a high chance of having dragon people around. Also, characters like Tupac are described in the story as having a super strength and a different sort of body, like a massive body. So I think maybe they are like a mash between a person and a Vishap of some kind, and maybe they are just evolved to be more like people. But hopefully, even if we do have humanoid dragons, that does not exclude the possibility of having mounts, like dragon mounts, like a non-humanoid version of dragons, more like a Vishap. So yeah, again, maybe my hopeful thinking, but I feel like that's one of the most realistic assumptions we can make about that. Third, we can see that based off the names and everything that we know so far about Natlan is that it's going to be inspired in West Africa and South American cultures, which I'm very excited as a South American myself. We can see clearly references to Peruvian culture, maybe just Incan, but definitely some Peruvian references there. Boxing as a sport is from Ethiopia. You know, a lot of African, Brazilian, Peruvian, maybe a little bit of Mexican, Aztec references there. So I'm very excited to see that. A lot of people think that Sumeru is based on Africa, but it's not really. It's more like, only if it's North Africa, but it's more like that west side of Asian continent. So yeah, I'm very excited to see Natlan. This mesh of cultures is going to be really cool to see. We have so many shared similarities, some of those that I tried to implement here on this Archon, Pyro Archon design of myself. And while I was researching references, I just kept thinking how many similarities we all have in our cultures. Fourth is that Murata dies in every Hoyoverse game. So I think it's safe to say that Murata as a Pyro Archon is dead. There is, of course, the possibility of her just being hidden or reborn in a different way, but I really think that she is just dead, and possibly the Phoenix as well. I will get into more detail on the last point of my assumptions. So next, I think that Natlan is not gonna be just a barren land. Everyone thinks that it's just gonna be like desert and volcano and ashes and that's it. But I think that we're actually going to start from a more foresty area that makes border with Sumeru. So of course, Natlan is described as volcanic region, and we know a lot about Margivari, which is now a sea of ashes, but we don't have anywhere in the Teva world currently that is actually tropical. And if you see, a lot of the West Africans and South America geography is a lot with rainforest. You know, we have rainforest in Congo, we have a huge rainforest in Brazil, Peru, Colombia, which is the Amazon. So I think it's safe to assume that we're gonna have some tropical area in Natlan, not just deserty, barren land areas. That would make sense if we are arriving there by boat, maybe from the new region that we just unlocked in Fontaine or some other entry points, but I imagine we're gonna have a little bit of a rainforesty or tropical forest as well. Next, I think we're gonna have 2 Archons again. This trend has been repeating itself ever since Inazuma. So in Inazuma we have Shogun, and we have her twin sister Makoto, and then we have in Sumeru we have Nahida and Hukadevata. I know that Hukadevata is not alive, just like Makoto isn't, but we also have the real Archon and its double kind of concept. Again, in Fontaine we have Farina, and then we have Fossilars, and I think this is gonna repeat in Natlan. If you say like, oh, but Zhongli and Venti don't have that. Well, first of all, we don't think that they have so far because we don't have any information about that. They could possibly have, we just don't know of it. And second, Venti and Zhongli are also the only original Archons alive. So maybe for being the original, they are this singular kind of thing. And well, this is for a bigger theory that I'm not going to delve into details, but all about the different timelines and the different, you know, the ley lines in the tree of life, the Yggdrasil of Genshin. Maybe rewriting those timelines ended up duplicating the Archons or something like that. But I think we're going to continue with this trend of having 2 Archons, which leads me to my final assumption. I think that Natlan main story will be about resurrection and not necessarily war. Murata may be the god of war, but that doesn't mean the story will be about that. And I have several reasons to think that, and even some assumptions about who is being resurrected and how. First of all, in the trailer of Teva, the description of each region is about the main theme of the main story. So for example, Fontaine is the masquerade of the guilty, which is a perfect metaphorical description of the 4.0 update main quest. For Natlan, the description is incandescent ode of resurrection. Also, we have a new mechanic being introduced in this update, which is the Bond of Life, where you lose HP, which essentially is life. And as we approach the update 5.0, this could be a core mechanic used in Natlan. Secondly, we have a lot of characters that are main characters that could be resurrected. Murata, the Phoenix, La Senora, and the Lava Walker. But I believe that one of those have already been resurrected, and I think that this resurrection is actually Bennett, which I will now explain why. In Bennett's character story number 2, we have the description. There was once a predicament of incomparable despair. a predicament that had all but swallowed an old adventurer. The scorching flames scalded his skin. The deafening thunder almost ruptured his eardrums, and the hollering winds threatened to rip his soul from him. At the end of this hellish journey, what awaited him was a baby. That's Bennett's character story, so I imagine the baby is Bennett. The adventurer crossed the scorching flames and found a baby. There was a deafening thunder that was loud. But as I have already mentioned earlier in this video, we know that the Sea of Flames no longer exists. Now the Margivari is a sea of ashes, completely silent. So the person who found this Bennett baby have crossed the scorching flames, and now it's a sea of ashes. So I believe that this adventurer is the Lava Walker. He was being afflicted by a predicament, lots of drama for him to cross the Sea of Flames. He lost the notion of time while he crossed it, so it's perfectly reasonable that he spent 1,000 years walking through the flames. To, at the end of the journey, this hellish journey, he found Bennett. So this baby could be a resurrection of the Phoenix, who is no longer nowhere to be seen, or of the Lava Walker himself, as if he died in this process and just awoken as a baby. Also because the baby was found alone, so I imagine it could be the Lava Walker. So I believe that Bennett is a resurrection of some of these main characters, and this is gonna be probably very important for the main story. Everyone thinks that Bennett is from Natlan already because of his signature dish, which is basically about resurrection. His physical appearance, he looks a lot like Janssen. He has the white hair and the green eyes, which no other Mondstadt has. And also there is some really cool theories about him maybe carrying the noses. I'll link the video theory that I watched down in the description below. I really recommend you guys watch it. And also, Madame Pink does say to us when we do the quest with the Guoba story that the stuff got passed and they only return in a new form. So I imagine that possibly the Phoenix revived as Bennett, or Murata revived as Bennett, or the Lava Walker revived as Bennett, and that we'll probably see more resurrection as a main core theme of Natlan's story, which is very exciting. I'm very, very curious to see where the Natlan story is going to go. We have basically no information about it, and these last points are just all my personal assumptions based on all the information that we have, but I think it's going to be fun to compare if I get anything right or not. And moving on to the design, as you guys can see, I had a lot of fun trying to design the Pyro Archon. She is not looking like Murata. That's intentional. I didn't want to do Himiko again, you know, because we already know how Himiko looks. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to just do my own creative original character based on the references that were used to make Natlan. So one of the first points that I would like to bring is that my style is very different from Genshin Impact style. It was very, very hard for me to, to try to make the outfit look inspired but still part of the Genshin world or universe. This also inspired me a lot to try to design the Pyro Dragon as well. So I decided to kind of split between the references and make the Pyro Archon a little bit more African inspired and the Pyro Dragon a little bit more Latin South American inspired. So he would have more Native American references, more, feathers, more greens and different kind of colors. I imagine the draconic humanoids or the little bishop dragons would have more of a South American influence. I don't know really why. Maybe they are feathered dragons or something like that. But of course, in every world, in every region, like I said, we have the original Archon, the fake double, and the dragon. So I imagine as if we would have the same. So we would have Murata, we would have the Pyro Archon, and we would have the Pyro Dragon. Obviously, in the Genshin Impact, it's probably gonna be Himiko, and then some dragon, which I imagine is gonna be Fuhua, because she has a phoenix, kind of design. Maybe the phoenix is a dragon of sorts, like a feather dragon, like I just said. But in this design that I created, I tried to put lots of different references. Of course, as a South American myself, it was quite interesting to research more about African, West African, and Latin American, like Peruvian and Mexican patterns and textiles and fabrics in general. It was very interesting how a very consistent element was masks. And if we look at Yonson's design, she is wearing a mask. I didn't even notice this at first, but maybe the Natlan characters are gonna wear masks, and probably they will all have the tribe tattoos as well. As you can see on her arm, she has like a tribe kind of marking there. This will be so cool because many African and South American old civilizations had a lot of tattoos with a lot of meaning. And one thing that I researched a lot is that I didn't know that, but in many African countries, the color red symbolizes death, which is perfect to that theme of resurrection. And the patterns is one of the things that I found the most similarity, which is crazy to think of because, you know, there is a huge ocean apart between Africa and American continents, but we have so many similar patterns being used by these, you know, old traditional cultures from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. There is no way, like, how did they think about the same thing at the same time? I find it so curious, so interesting. There's lots of almost like triangular shapes, lots of reds and blacks, and yeah, it's very interesting. I tried to implement all those elements, kind of like mix them together to make something new, and still try to put some like leather and some other elements to make it a little bit more modernized and fit into the Genshin universe. And I took the liberty to make a mask for the Archon as well, which is very inspired in West African countries, more specifically this Ghanan mask that I found online. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. That was a very complex video, you know, a lot of information. A lot of research went on the back of it. I hope you guys enjoyed the design of the Archon. Please let me know what your thoughts. If you have any theories for Natlan, what would you like to see in Natlan? Is there anything that you're like really expecting or hoping that there is in the world? And please let me know if you liked my redesign. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and see you on the next one.